right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to day 2 of our ZVM training. Just a reminder that this is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our website. All questions should be typed into the chat box or emailed to questions@velocitysoftware.com. And up first, we have ZVM Basics with James Vincent. Go ahead.
Well, welcome back, everybody. The intent of this session is to give you a better foundation of how to use your ZVM user ID, especially around the CP and CMS environments. This is to give you the ability to be a little bit more productive and really get started with ZVM. So some good references for you. These are the IBM manuals that are provided with the ZVM system. You can search for these manuals if you don't have access to them already. Search for them online through Google or your favorite search engine and find them on the IBM site. So the CMS primer, it's really, really good for learning the entire CMS environment. It's a lot of information to read, but it is a good starting point for the environment. And then the CMS User's Guide is another really good reference to get a lot more detail on certain sections of CMS. And I gave you some chapters to focus on as we're going through some of the topics through this session. And then the CP commands and utilities reference, again, it's a reference manual for all the CP commands and utilities that are available. And the CP messages and codes is also available if you would prefer to find error messages that you may receive and what they mean. So diving right in, ZVM, it creates two environments, the control program and the virtual machine. The control program, which is called CP, it's used to control the resources of your virtual machine's configuration. So everything that is set up for you when you log on to the system, CP takes care of and sets up for you and manages. So at IPL, or the initial program load when you log on, by default, most people have CMS set up to IPL when they log in. But a user ID running under ZVM, or what could be called a guest of ZVM, could be set up to IPL Linux, ZOS, another ZVM system, or really any other OS operating system that runs on System Z. So CMS, the long definition of the CMS acronym is Conversational Monitoring System. And originally it was the Cambridge Monitoring System. Very rarely does anybody use that term. It's always just CMS. Now, just as a simple visual, hopefully most of you had caught this when Rick Barlow went through his System Z overview. There were pictures like this to show the base layer of the ZVM operating system. It controls and manages all the virtual machines on that operating system. So when you log on your user ID, a virtual machine is created. And the two environments, the control program and the CMS, or the operating system that you IPL, are created. Your virtual machine is defined in the CP directory. And that CP directory, that contains all the information needed to set up your user ID environment. So how many CPUs, how much memory, all the privilege classes you might have, what OSs to IPL, like I mentioned, IPL CMS or Linux or any other system that may have been built for that particular guest. Access to DASD, or what's called disks or mini disks. Those are the storage areas for your files, and much more. So there's more that can be done in the CP directory, but I hope you get the idea that the CP directory really is the place that defines everything you have access to. So ZVM builds your virtual machine when you log on. So logging on through your TN3270 client, which I hope most of you have already done, that's when your setup occurs by the system. So your user ID and password or passphrase to get on your user ID. Now, when you're on your virtual machine or your user ID, there are some virtual devices that are normally defined, and these will become apparent to you. You'll see them in different references, but these are some of the devices that are created. The 0009 or cons, the console, that's your virtual machine console or your display. So ZVM sets up these virtual devices, and this device, the 9 or the console device, is what's being displayed to you through your connected TN3270 session. The next three, the C, D, and E, or the reader, punch, and print virtual devices, are what's called spool devices. Those are used as the virtual devices of card readers, card punch, and printers. And they act like those actual hardware devices, but they're virtualized. And we'll get a little bit more into the spool devices a little bit later in this presentation. And then you may have a 191 device. This is the default address for your personal mini disk. So you might have some storage to put your own personal files, and normally that's your 191 mini disk. If you're on your VM user ID and you enter CP query virtual, you can see everything that your user ID has defined. For example, I just did a quick one on a simple user ID, and you can see the devices I talked about, the 9, the Charlie, the dog, the easy, and they're named as such, the console, the reader, the punch, the print. And then some DASD devices that I also have access to. So you can see the DASD 0191, that is my storage area, and it is read-write to me, so I can add files to it if I want to. So the OS that's defined in your directory normally gets loaded at login. That's the normal setup for pretty much every user ID, is something is IPL'd, and for most people, it's going to be IPLing CMS. So the initial program load or IPL command handles all of that. And some examples for the IPL command, you can IPL CMS just as is, or you can add a parm of AutoCR, which will tap enter to continue the IPL process and not wait for you to tap enter. You can also IPL devices, and that's normally used when you're IPLing Linux or some other operating system on that particular guest. If your directory is not set up correctly, or you've not IPL'd a valid OS, a valid operating system or disk, there's not a whole lot you can do other than just CP commands. So there's no user interface like CMS provides. So this is an example of logging on. Again, I'm hoping most of you have already done this and seen this on your own user IDs, but logging on to a user ID, entering the password, ZVM then starts setting up your environment. It's going to type out some information about the operating system, the version, the release, and then it's going to tell you about your environment. So it's going to show you how many files you have in your spool. It's going to tell you when you're logging on. That's just your logon stamp. And then a little bit about CMS, because this particular user ID IP'd CMS. So it just shows you the version of CMS that's coming up. And in this case, I used ZCMS, which is another variant of the CMS operating system. Oh, some pointers. So yes, this is a login to the homework user ID. The highlighted message is from RACF. So all your systems that may have RACF on them, you're going to see a message of the last time that you logged onto the system. And then the preamble of ZVM. And there is a log message option in the ZVM system. Consider it like the message of the day you may be familiar with, but it gives the system administrator the ability to put some kind of either a security message or an important message for everybody to see. And then your spool files and the CMS info line. The ready prompt. The ready prompt is good to know about. If you see the ready prompt, that is simply telling you CMS is waiting for you to tell it to do something. So it's not running anything. It's just sitting ready, waiting for you. So let's dive into CMS itself. So as far as files, you're going to be doing probably a lot of work with files when you're logged on to your user ID. And a file, in honestly the simplest terms, is it's a list of items, or like a text file could be just a list of items or a letter or just something you've typed in to a particular file. So simple text. It could be source code. So you could be coding a routine in Rex or in exec, or even you could be coding program source code in assembler, PO1, whatever language you may be working in. But it also can contain other data, such as compiled code. Those are not normally editable, and you shouldn't be editing compiled code files or any files that appear to be in what looks like jumbled um, characters. They're not, readable kind of content. So files in CMS are built with a three-part identifier. There's three parts to it that CMS uses. The first two is a file name and a file type. They can be any combination of letters and numbers, and each one can be no more than 8 characters. And then I listed the valid characters. It's the normal A to Z, 0 to 9, and some special characters that you're allowed to use within the file name and file type if you wish. Now, if you go read the manual, the CMS User's Guide states that you can use lowercase characters, that they're valid, and they're technically valid, but that pretty much renders your file unusable. So if you really try hard, you can do it, but I wouldn't recommend it. The file mode is the third part of a file identifier. And that tells CMS or it tells you where that file is located on your system. So it's either on a mini disk or an SFS directory. And we're going to get more into those locations a little bit later. The file mode is normally followed by a number, and that number for now just can be ignored. The default file mode for your storage is A. So that's your primary storage area. And some examples of a file name, type, and mode triplet is like your profile exec A or inventory listing C. So 2 different files in 2 different places. Some special file types that you should be aware of. There are a whole bunch of them, but you can find them listed in the CMS User's Guide. But these are ones that you'll probably see and want to know about. A file type of exec is an executable script file, normally written in Rex. And you're going to learn all about Rex tomorrow. Some help files, the help, and then some characters after it. Those are source files for the help facility, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Modules are executable compiled code. So those are runnable routines or functions that you can have. Rex is a CMS pipeline stage. It's another executable type of a routine that CMS pipelines will use, and you'll learn about CMS pipelines tomorrow. Text is a compiled text deck, normally from some programming language that you or someone else has been working on and developing and has been compiled. So a text deck would be that example. And then Xedit. An Xedit file type is an Xedit macro. So it's an executable script that's used in Xedit, which we'll be learning about in the next session. So the most common way to create a new file is to use Xedit. Xedit is the editor in CMS. So creating a new or updating an existing file, you would type on the command line Xedit and then the identifier for the file name, file type, and file mode. So if the file does not exist anywhere on the disks that you have or the storage that you have accessed, a brand new empty file is presented to you to build. If it does exist, you're put into an edit session, an Xedit session with that file content. If you omit the file mode, so if you leave the file mode off the Xedit command, CMS is going to search everything you have accessed starting at A and working down through the alphabet. And if nothing was found, it defaults to A to build a new file. Now, you can manage files right from the CMS command line, or you can use a utility. Now, some commands that you really want to keep handy and know about to manage files. The first one is list file. And list file with file name, file type, file mode, it just lists the files and some extra information on your console. So you can list file whatever you happen to be looking for, or you can list file everything on a particular disk that's accessed. So there's a lot of different ways to show information on those files. Erase does exactly that. It erases the file that you specify. As long as the file is on a read, write, accessed storage area, you can erase it. Same with copy file. You're going to copy file some input file to an output file with some options. That the in file and out file are the triplets, so file name, file type, file mode for each. And then some options that you may be using old date, so will the file that you copy to will inherit the date of the input file. And replace means just that. If the output file exists, go ahead and replace that file. Rename renames one file to a different file name. And then Xedit. We talked about this previously. You Xedit a file to either create a new one or update an existing one. Now, file list is the utility that you can use to manage your files, and you're probably going to spend a lot of time in file list. This particular utility provides a full environment to let you manage all the files by listing the files that you ask for. So the syntax is just like list file, but file list with a file name, file type, and file mode, and some options if you choose. If you just type file list on the command line, it's going to show you everything on your A disk or directory, the storage at A. It's going to show you everything there. You can use wildcards for the 3 parameters for file lists. So if you want to look at all the files with a file type of exec that you have accessed. You can enter that with file list space asterisk space exec space asterisk. And you're going to get a listing of every file you have available with a file type of exec. This is an example of the file list screen. So the first thing I'm going to show is on the left side with the file name and file type and the file mode of what you started with the file list command. So I asked for everything on my A disk. So all these files are on my A disk, and it's showing them all to me on the left side. File list also provides you the file structure, the size, and the date and time stamp of each file. The command area under the CMD column in front of all of these files allows you to type commands right in front of the file to use that file name, file type, and file mode as input to the command. For instance, if you saw, I'll just go back real quick, but you could see xedit typed in front of the second file on that second line there. So I can xedit that search results file by just typing xedit and hitting enter. The function keys at the bottom allow you to do different actions. So refresh, if you change files in the list, you can hit refresh and it'll refresh your view. Sorting different ways, if you want to sort by size or type, you can do that from there. PF11, you can hit the F11 key next to a file and it takes you into xedit. So the PF keys are just a different way to manage the lists that you see in the file list. And you have a command line at the bottom. So this is used to do navigation if you're going to do a search for some particular file name or portion of a file name. And you could run special file list environment commands. So file list has a few commands that you can use to execute on that command line. One in particular that is extremely handy when you're in file list is called execute. So it's a routine that you can use in file list and also a reader list and dir list environment, which I'll talk about in a little while. So this execute will do commands and actions against a range of the items that are displayed in file list. And I am going to show an example live just because I think this is a very important and powerful command for you to use. So you can do maximize this. If you're in file list, I'm going to ask for all the files on my A disk that start with PROF. And sure enough, it shows me 2 files. Now I want to rename, or actually I want to copy these files. And instead of having to type next to each file, I just want to do it real quick and easy. So I can do an execute and then asterisk, which means I want this to be done with every file listed. And I'm going to do a copy file / prof mine equal. And what that copy file command does is the copy file and then the slash. The slash simply is a placeholder that tells the command replace the slash with the file name, file type, file mode from the line that it's executing on. So if I execute this, I see asterisks next to each file, which means something ran against that file. And if I hit F2, I see the 2 brand new files that I copied. So if you've got a long list of files and you need to do some command against them, that's where execute is really handy to know about. So you don't have to type uh, extra letters and a whole bunch of same commands on a bunch of files in the list. So hopefully that makes some sense, and you'll remember that execute is available in those utilities. Quiz time. This is time for you to do the Slido if you're able to.
All right, I'm going to lock the voting in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Go ahead, James. You can reveal the answers.
Excellent. You all did very well. Everybody answering the questions correctly tells me that possibly I am explaining things reasonably well. All right, we will continue on. Now we're going to talk about the profile exec file. You've seen this possibly a couple times, especially in my examples, but this profile exec file is automatically processed when you IPL into CMS, and it's normally found on your A disk, so your personal storage area. It contains CP and CMS commands that you want to run at the start of a new CMS session. So things like accessing other disks and directories, setting up PF keys, changing colors on your screen, uh, setting up CMS synonyms, all these different things that you can do to set up your user ID the way you want it. Most times a default brand new user ID is going to be set up with a very simple profile exec. And in this case, the profile exec that is built on your training user IDs is this example that I'm showing. So it's just a little bit of Rex code to do a CP command. It's also doing a couple of execs. So the execs are just routines to access different things on your system. So some example commands, and this is just a few um, subset of commands that you could consider for your own profile exec. You could do CP set and then PF and the number of the PF key that you want to set, and then a command to set to those PF keys or to that PF key. You can type help CP set PF for more information on setting up a PF key and how to code them into your profile exec when you're ready. Another useful one is CP set date format. You can set the date format for output from various responses or various command responses by setting the date format. So in my case, I prefer the ISO date format, so I use CP set date format ISO date. And you can look at the help on the different date options that you can use. Now we're going to get into the spool and reader files. CP creates your Charlie, the 00 Charlie or C device, which is your virtual card reader, or for short, reader or RDR. That reader spool device is where files that are sent to you are stored. Those files are in CP spool. Those are not on a disk that you have. It's just in a spool that CP manages for you. So you may see on your user ID a message like reader file, some number sent from some other user ID and the other information included. So somebody has sent you a file. and it's sitting in your reader. You can use CP commands to see what you have in your reader. Two commands like CP query reader, which is, you can also do the short form, which is just Q space R, and see files in your reader. You can add all to the end of that command and see more information, such as the date stamp and the actual file name and file type that those files were set or sent as. Some other commands to manage reader files. You can purge readers. So if you see a file in your reader you just don't need it anymore, or if you look and say, I don't need any of these files, you can use CP purge reader, a specific number, which is the file number of the reader, or all. And if you say all or type all, it will purge all your reader files. So be careful with that one. You can also receive a reader file to your storage. There are a lot of options with receive, but the simplest form is receive and then the file number of the reader file. And then reader list. This is very similar to file list and gives you an environment to manage and work with all of your reader files through a nice utility. So this looks probably very familiar to you. It looks similar to the file list, except it's going to show you specific information about reader files. So the file name and file type are included if they're available. So the first three were files sent by somebody to you. The last one was a file that was created by CP and it did not have an associated file name and file type with it. Reader lists also provide some details on each of the files, like what the class, what kind of a file it is in the spool, where it originated from, and the date and time, and the number of records that the file has. Just like file list, you have a command prefix area that you can type commands next to each one. So you could actually type purge next to one of the files and it would purge that file. Function keys, just like in file list, give you the ability to put your cursor on one of those files and use one of the function keys, such as PF11. You can use peek, which will go into that file to let you see what the content of that file is before actually receiving it onto your storage. And the command line at the bottom. And again, you could use execute with asterisk, receive, slash, equal, A, which would receive each of those files on your A disk. Now note that the fourth file will throw an error because there's no file name and file type associated with that last file. For that one, you'd have to do receive, a slash, and then give it some file name and file type, then A. So you have to assign a file name and file type for that kind of file. Now I showed you can receive files from other people. You can send files to other people. So if you have a file, let's say it's called tic tac exec on your A disk, and you need to send it to a user ID called homework. You could do the CMS command, send file, the file name, file type, file mode, keyword to, TO, and then the user ID that's going to receive it. So send file tic tac exec A to homework. Some options you can put on the send file command that are handy. NOAC, which means don't acknowledge when the person you sent it to receives the file. So if the homework user ID gets on and does the CMS receive command against your file, by default, you get a message back to say, homework received your file. The other option, no log, is to not create a log entry. Send file and receive, by default, will log when you do those commands and keep a history of those commands. No type means don't type anything on the console. If you don't want it to be noisy, when you do a send file command, you can include no type as an option. So when you send the file to homework, they would see in their reader that tic-tac exec just like it's shown below. Now that the file that did not have a file name and file type that you had seen prior, those are sometimes created when you spool your console. And by spooling your console, what that means is you want to capture and retain any messages that are displayed on your virtual console. You can do this yourself, or it can be set up in your profile exec, or it can be set actually in your CP directory. But you can enter the command cp spool cons start to asterisk, which means I want this console file to go to me when it's done, and then name it if you want to. You can add name and then a file name and a file type, and that will actually put a file name and file type on that spool file. Once you do that, as console messages are produced, they're collected and put into this spool file. And you can see those spool files or the console spool file by doing a query print all on your user ID. And in my case, you can see I have the open console spool file and I named it James console. So that is currently collecting my console messages. Now, when you're done, you can do a couple different things. CP close console closes the console where it is, but it keeps your console spooled. So it's going to continue to collect, but just in a new console file. But everything that had been collected is sent to wherever you specified when you started your console spooling. So in my case, I said to asterisk, which means send it to me. So when I entered close console, it sent me a reader file. So now I have a brand new reader file that has all of my console messages. If you use CP spool cons stop, that closes the console, sends the file, but it stops all the spooling. So it stops collecting all of your console messages. All right, command search order in CMS. When you enter a command on the CMS command line, CMS is going to try to scan for things that are executable on areas that that you have accessed or within memory. So the very first thing CMS is going to look for are routines that you have loaded in memory. And exec load and nukex load are two different ways to load executable things into your memory area. And I'll save that for you for later to dig into those two commands if you wish. If it's not found in memory, it's going to continue looking through anything you have, any storage you have access, whether it's a disk or a directory, starting at the A disk or the whatever is accessed as A all the way through Z. Then it's going to look internally in CMS. It's going to look inside and say, is this one of my commands? Is this the CMS command? And then if it can't find anything, it's going to ask CP, hey, is this your command? So it's going to do this scan by default for you. If you prefix commands, it will shortcut where and what CMS looks for. So if you know you're running an exec and you type exec first, and then the name of the exec file that you want to run, CMS is only going to look for exec files. It's not going to try to find modules or CMS commands or CP commands. If you prefix with CP, it's only going to ask CP for that command. Now in CMS, CP is actually a CMS command. And all that does is hand it off to the CP environment. #CP, which you're going to see referenced often, #CP is very special. It breaks directly to CP immediately. There's no searching done. CMS is not involved. It tells the control program immediately execute what I've got after #CP. Now, this is just a word of warning, but you can create execs named the same as other commands, and they will take precedence if people or you are trying to run those commands. For example, if I create a CP exec file that just types out on the console the string you wish, and I enter in CMS CP query time, which normally should tell me the date and time of the system, I would get on my console you wish. So you can interject and cause a lot of confusion if you're not careful, if you're creating execs with the same name as CP or CMS commands. So just be careful. Query time. This is a CP command that shows the date and time details, and query disk is a CMS command that shows your access disks. They both look the same. They're both running the query command. But what CMS is doing for you is that it knows query is special in that it could be a CP command or it could be CMS. If it does not find a CMS query subcommand, it continues to CP and asks, is this your query command? That's why query time works and doesn't give you an error. Same with query disk. CMS found the disk subcommand and does what it's supposed to. So some commands like query and set especially, those check further with the subcommands that are entered for all the different environments. Now this is just saving time and shorter form of typing a lot of these commands. CP query time, simply you can type Q space T. It's just the short form. So there's a lot of commands have short forms that you can use to save yourself time or just to save typing. You can set your own synonyms for commands. For instance, I have a file called James Synonyms, and that includes my own synonyms for things that I want. For example, I set file list so that I can enter it and get to it really quick by just typing FF or just F on the command line. FF is what I normally use if I want to get into file list very quick, but I can also be really lazy and just type F and then a file name file type if I want. And that lets me use file list. I also protect some of the commands like log off. The short form of log off is log. And there have been routines created on the system to log different things, like logging time, logging whatever the case may be. There's some routine called log, but the log ends up finding log off if that particular routine wasn't available when I typed log. So I protect that. I insist that if I'm going to use log off, I have to type the entire command, log off. So it saves me from losing my 3270 session when I don't expect to. So if you're really interested to look up and learn about synonyms, chapter 5 in the user's guide, the CMS user's guide, is the place to look. So let's talk about storage. ZVM uses storage that's either a mini disk or a shared file system, or SFS for short, file space. So it's a directory on a file space. Let's talk about disks first. So MDisk or mini disk. A mini disk is a location on a real DASD volume. All of the systems, all the Z systems use DASD volumes to store things, to have things for the operating system and for users on that operating system. In your CP directory, you have an MDisk or could have an MDisk that is part of a real DASD volume. So the DASD volume in this case is called VM1005. And the numbers before it just define starting at some cylinder for 50 cylinders is this mini disk. So you are defined that in your CP directory. You normally do not need to be aware of or concerned with this detail, but if you start getting into system administration of a ZVM system, it becomes more important to understand how mini disks are defined. Your mini disk is going to function exactly like a real full disk or DASD volume. It's smaller than a a full DASD volume, but it's going to function and behave just like a real DASD volume. Now, directories. An SFS directory is an allocation of space on a shared file system pool. The allocation is done by user ID, and normally that is the owner of the storage, which would be your user ID. Some total number of blocks are associated with that particular user ID. So in this case, the file pool of SFS VM3 and then my user ID is how it's designated. Subdirectories can be created from the top directory, which is the SFS VM3 colon and then a user ID dot. So you can create one or more subdirectories off of the top or root directory of that particular file pool. So SFS is very, very much more, is a lot more flexible than mini disks in that storage is defined for your directory, but if you start running out, an administrator can just add more storage on the fly without having to change anything for your directories or your CP directory. So if you have a mini disk and you're running out of storage, extra work has to be done to add more space for you to have on that particular mini disk. Class number 2, this is just a little pre-announcement that we do have a second class coming up on July 21st and 22nd. And one of the sessions in that class is CMS shared file system usage and administration, which will go into a lot more detail on the shared file system. Now, CMS command to show what you have accessed is query disk. And query disk just really gives you some basic information of the disks and directories that you might have accessed. You can also put a file mode after the query disk command if you only want to see one particular disk and its details displayed for you. So that example just shows you what I have accessed on that user ID. You can see the dir line, the second line of the output, or the third line actually of the output. That is telling me I've got an SFS directory accessed as B, but it doesn't tell me what it is. It's more handy. Well, I'll tell you the next one. I'll tell you the answer to that one in a bit. This one, the query virtual DASD, this tells you what virtual DASD devices you have currently linked to your user ID. So these DASD devices or mini disks are available to you to be able to use. This is a subset of the query virtual all command that I had shown really early in this presentation, but this just shows you your DASD volumes. List dir. This lists the SFS directories that are defined that you own on your default file pool. So if you've had a SFS directory or an SFS pool set up with your user ID and some space allocated on it, and you've been set in the CP directory to access that particular directory, you can see with lister the default file pool and any subdirectories that might be defined. Lister, you can also lister by pool name, colon, and then any user ID options that you want or subdirectories that you would like to include. Now, dir list. Dir list probably looks very familiar to you. It's just like file list and reader list, except it's giving you a basically a UI or an environment to be able to manage and work with the directories that you have access or have accessible to you. Very similar to file list and reader list. It has a command prefix area. It has PF keys. It has the command line, but it's only showing you the directory names of your SFS area. This is the command that I was referencing before, query accessed. Instead of query disk, I use query accessed pretty much all the time because it tells me what's accessed and it tells me the SFS directories included with that access. So that B access, it said it on the query disk, it'll say -dir, but query accessed actually shows me, oh, that's my vsi_prv:james.shared_tools directory. So you get a little more detail to know what you have accessed and where. You can also add the file mode, so you can say query accessed B, and it's only going to show you that B directory information. You can also use r/w for read write or r/o for read only. If you do the r/w, it's only going to show you things that you have read write access to. Sometimes handy to have. Now, accessing things. Mini disks usually require you to enter some CP commands and CMS commands. So normally you would do a cp link command to get access to someone else's disk. So if you wanted to get to my 191 mini disk, you would enter the command cp link James 191. So James and 191 are my mini disk virtual device, and then some virtual device that you have available on your user ID that's not used, 310. RR means I just want read access to that disk. And then you would access that virtual device that got linked. Access 310 as F. And CMS would then access that virtual mini disk as your file mode F. Now, shared file system directories are a lot easier. You only have to access them. So you would access and then the full path of the directory name, the file mode, and then optionally, if you want to set write access to be able to read write files to it, you could include the option or the option write. Now, as far as removing access, there's a precise way for mini disks and what I'll call lazy ways. Um, so the precise way to do that is you do a CMS command to release the file mode. So if CMS gets rid of the file mode from your list of accessed resources, and then CP detach whatever virtual address you had set it or linked it as. So in this case, release F, CMS gets rid of that access, and then CP detach 310, CP removes that virtual 310 device from your user ID. Or you can just type release the file mode, open paren, detach. And it does all of that work above for you. Or the lazy way, you just CP detach 310. And CMS catches they CP and CMS handshake together and say, hey, CP, I'm getting rid of 310 CMS. Are you using it right now? And CMS looks and says, yes, I have it accessed. I'm going to release it. Releasing directories, again, a lot easier. All you do is release the file mode that it was accessed as, and that access to that directory is gone. There's a utility that CMS provides called VM link. And this VM link utility makes things a lot easier, and it has a, a, a lot of options. It has a ton of options that you can use with that utility. So in its simplest form, to link a disk, as I showed with trying to link to my disk, my 191 disk, you would just you could enter exec vmlink James 191 or just vmlink James 191. You don't have to prefix it with exec. And then for a directory, you use the key parameter of .dir before the directory name. So you can use vmlink to get to both of those. vmlink takes care of finding an open file mode and an open virtual device for disks. You don't have to specify anything if you don't want to. Some useful options with vmlink, things like adding open paren file list. If all I wanted to do was go into file list on all the files that are in that SFS directory of .myfiles, that's the command you would use, and vmlink would present file list to you with the list of files. And when you use pf3 or quit out of the file list command, vmlink would end, and that directory would not be accessed or anything. It'd be done. You can also invoke other commands after that particular resource is is available. So if I do a vmlink.dir, the directory, and invoke followed by some command, and in this case, I want to list all the files that have a file type of README, and .fm is a keyword for vmlink to replace the file mode that it accessed that resource at. So if I do that command and it accesses that directory as file mode Z or Z, it would replace that command with list file asterisk readme Z and run the command. And once it finished, that resource would not be, it would be gone again. vmlink has a lot more details in the CMS User's Guide, or you can type help vmlink. Again, there are a lot of different options and different forms of the vmlink command that you can use. It's a really powerful command, and it's a great one to start learning and get used to. Saves a lot of time. Another quiz.
Okay, Slido is up. You should be able to join back in. Go ahead, James, and reveal the answers.
All right, awesome, everybody. Thank you for participating and giving me a chance to drink my coffee. All right, let's move on. You've seen me reference help on commands and other items within the environment. I'm going to give you a little bit more information on the help facility within CMS. There's online help that you can refer to when you're logged into CMS. So if you just enter help and press enter on the command line, you get a panel of various functions and topics and tasks. There's a whole list of things that you have available to you. To navigate through the help, you place your cursor on any of the items that are highlighted and press enter, and it's going to open that particular item or resource that you've selected. You can go to whatever menu you need to if you know what you're looking for directly. So if you know you're going to be looking for a CP command, but you're not sure what it is, you can type help CP menu, and it'll give you the CP menu. Same with CMS and Xedit. So the three different environments that you can pull up the menu directly. The query and set, those special commands that I mentioned before, have their own submenus. So if you did help CP query menu and help CP set menu, also the CMS versions of CMS query and CMS set, they will all bring up those subset menus so you can dig in even further. Most commands have help associated with them. For example, help file list or help CP link. So if you need more information on file list, you would just type help file list, or the CP command, help CP link. So each one would take you directly into the help for that particular command, and you could dig in and figure that command out and what options it has. Now, help, if you forget to type the prefix of the particular topic you entered, help will try to find it for you. So if you type help link, it would present the CP link command because the only place it finds it is under CP. So if you happen to forget and you just type without the prefix, it does try to help you out. But if you do know the specific environment that you're looking for the help on, it really helps to it will get there faster if you prefix that environment. Help is also really useful for any kind of message that you may receive on your console from either running commands or any other activity that's happening on your user ID. So you'll end up seeing messages that are errors, warnings, and informational type messages. The errors normally end in the letter E, so that first word that's displayed in the example, the HCP LNM 107, and the last letter E, the E indicates it's an error message. If it was a warning, it would be a W, and informational is I. There are other types of messages that you can look into, but for now, those are the most common, the error, warning, and informational. Those are the ones you'll probably see. Now, if I want to know more about what does that error message really mean, I could type help and then the first three characters of the error message, and then the last numbers and final letter of the error message. So in this case, it would be help HCP 107E. Or I can just use the entire error message and put that on the help. Either way, help will figure out what you're looking for. And that would present me with more details on that error message and let me figure out what I need to do to either deal with it or just know that it happened. Now, some of your systems may have RACF installed. All of your systems should have TCP/IP installed, and those products have their own help files. Your system administrator can make those files available to you. So if those files are also available, you can type help and then the product name like help RACF or help TCP/IP, and those will present the menu of available help for those particular products. More help is available through the IBM VM listserv. And this is a community of people that are really just out there to help everybody. This has been around for a long, long time. I'll say decades. It's been around for as long as I can remember. So you can sign up anytime you would like to by just sending an email to that email address displayed. And in the body of your email, you type subscribe, IBM VM, and then your first name and last name. And that's it. And you send it. And the listserv will register you and send back an email to you with more information, more details on how you can do different things. If you want to post or reply to any messages on that particular listserv, you would send the response or a new email to ibmvm@listserv.uark.edu. This is, again, this is a great community. The people on there are always very helpful. There's no silly questions. There's no question that's too basic. So if you're new to the environment, this is a really good way to get some answers really quick, um, and have again a community behind you to help you and get you going to learn how the ZVM system works for whatever you're trying to do. So I would highly recommend, if you're not signed up already, to sign up on the listserv and have the ability to ask questions. All right, a few extra items for this environment. Let's talk about security. Hopefully your system is set up with an external security manager. In most cases, it's RACF. If your system does not have an external security manager, then I would say you don't really have security on your system. CP by default has a little bit of security, but not much. but most systems are going to have RecF. And at some point, you're going to want to change your user ID. Change your password for your user ID. If you want to change your password on a system with RecF, once you're logged on, you could do a couple different variations of the command, but basically it's a exec rack pw, which is short for password, but it's just a easier typing. And then password, open parenthesis, your old password, your new password, close parenthesis. If your system is using pass phrases, the command structure is a little bit different because you have to enclose in quotes your phrases, so your current phrase and your new phrase. And case matters, so be sure you type in the case of those phrases exactly. So when you use those commands, anytime you change your password on a RACF enabled system, they have to follow the rules that have been set by the system or security administrator of that ZVM system. So on a passphrase enabled system, I could enter rack pw phrase, my old passphrase, and then some new passphrase that's a little bit silly. So that's how I would change my passphrase on my user ID. There's a couple other ways to change your password. When you're at logon, when you're starting to log on, if you enter your user ID on the logo or just type log on your user ID on the command line and tap enter with no password, you get prompted to enter your password. On that prompt, you'll also see to change your password, enter, and then that format of the password string where you enter your current password slash a new password slash and then the new password again. So you can change your password at any time right at the logon. If your password has expired, and normally with RACF systems or any external security manager, your password will be set to expire after a certain amount of time. You'll see at logon when you try to log in with your current password, a message that says password expired. And then it's going to prompt you similarly, but this time it's just going to say enter your new password slash new password. So those are two additional ways to change your password. Now, at some point you might be getting into running things that you didn't intend, or something is not running the way you had hoped, and it's continuing to loop or causing problems. You can use HX on the command line, which is it halts execution. It completely stops everything that was running in CMS. So if you get into some kind of a loop of a program and you just want to get out, HX will help you do that. If you're running Rex routines, some exec that's running, you can also use alternatively HI or halt interpretation. It's like HX, but it doesn't totally kill the environment. It just stops the current Rex program that's running. So if something called that Rex routine, whatever called it is going to get control back and continue running. Now, if you execute a CP command, let's say you did the query virtual all command, and for some reason you have dozens and dozens of devices defined on your user ID, but you don't want to have to keep hitting clear screen to get through them all. You can hit PA2, whatever you've got defined on your keyboard for your TN3270 session, or sorry, PA1. PA1 will stop long-running CP commands. So if a CP command is entered and it's just showing you a bunch of things on, it's just screen after screen of output, you can hit PA1 and CP will stop displaying all of the output. It just interrupts it. Or you can restart your entire virtual machine. So if something's going bad and you just want things to go back to normal, you can just start over. So when you log on, again, CP is going to IPL CMS automatically. You can IPL that manually at any time. So #CP IPL, just that by itself, restarts the last thing you IPL'd. So if you IPL CMS at logon, if you enter #CP IPL, it's going to IPL CMS again. You could put the name of the operating system or environment that you want to IPL, like the second example, #CP IPL CMS. You can explicitly put that in. And you can also include the parm. So the parm, again, just automatically does the enter or automatic carriage return is what the AutoCR stands for. So you don't have to tap enter when you IPL CMS. It'll do it for you. I mentioned ZCMS. This is just for information. There is a ZCMS right now. CMS is 32-bit, ZCMS is 64-bit, and I believe very soon CMS will just default to 64-bit, and you won't even have to worry about having two different kinds of CMS. For the most part, everybody just IPL CMS, and that is sufficient. Another way to stop things from happening that are runaway and you just want to be done with it all, #CP, log off. That logs off your user ID. Very handy for the end of the day or getting out of bad situations. Probably will #CP log off and log back on again if you want to continue working from the beginning. Alrighty, it's time for some homework. If you have access to our demo system and your training user ID that you were provided, this is your homework assignment. I want you to log on to your class user ID, your training user ID that we provided you, and enter those commands that are listed. The CP spool command, the VM link, the query, the list file, and then CP close console. And as soon as you do CP close console, your console messages will all go to the homework user ID and we'll know that you did your homework. Very, very simple. Once you're done with your homework, please poke around, try file list, try the things that were mentioned in this session and see how they work for you and try to understand more detail, just get used to the environment. If you do not have access to our demo system because of firewalls or whatever situation that you're in, log on to your own user ID on your ZVM system that you have available to you. When you're on your user ID, just enter these three commands, three fairly simple commands, and capture the output and send that to homework@velocitysoftware.com. And if you would, please include, make sure your name will be on the email, so that should suffice. That should be enough. Thank you very much for attending this session of the second day module. If you have more questions, remember you can send them at questions@velocitysoftware.com. You certainly can post any question you may have in the chat. I will stay on for just a few minutes and answer anything that might be pressing immediately. Otherwise, we will shift into a 10-minute break. Were there any lingering questions, moderators?
I think everything's answered.
Excellent.
All
If
right,
you
thank
need,
you.
real quick, I'm sorry, if you need access to this and any of the sessions that we're providing on this training that have the homework listed in them, they're on the velocitysoftware.com educate/training webpage or the last https velocitysoftware.com PDFs page. Either place you can find these session files and you can download them and get reference to all the details of the homework.
All right, thank you, James. We're going to take a 10-minute break, so I will put up a timer and we will see you back here in 10 minutes.